What a very warm welcome to you guys. Hello, it's Kasim, and welcome to another episode of Student Problems. I want to firstly start off as usual by thanking you very much for joining me in today's episode. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me as I share with you some ideas, as I share with you some strategies, some thoughts, some ideologies that perhaps can help you to become a higher, fuller expression of who you're capable of becoming. So, as usual, guys, to do this sort of PR stuff, if you like and you find some of the things that I'm going to share with you today useful, please like and subscribe to our channel Casimotive. That's where I put most of our content. That's where I put most of the sort of uploads and the smaller clips and broken up clips, so it's easier for you to digest, and there's some exclusive stuff on our YouTube channel which you will not get anywhere else. So please do subscribe to that. So there is 5 different questions or different scenarios which I've been given this week that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to share some thoughts with you on. And those 5 topics are: number 1, somebody asked, do you think when someone close to you dies, a part of you dies as well? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, number 1, is the second thing goes on the lines of, I ended a 2-year relationship yesterday, and it never really fully hit me until today after I've dropped off some stuff, and it goes something on those lines. The third one is, what lessons has rejection taught you about life? The fourth one is, do you think there is a difference between being addicted to something and being passionate? And the fifth thing is intelligent or wisdom more useful? So we've got a great sort of culmination of different topics this week. So I think it was going to be a really interesting conversation for me to kind of share some thoughts with you. And these are great questions that I've had to think about, which leads me to one of the things that I want to say before we get into these questions, which is that you're going to see me looking down on my notes today. I made some notes because I really want to add some value to your life, and some of the things that I'm going to share with you today, because they're such complex topics and they've got so many layers, and I have about 10 minutes to talk about some of these subjects. I want to squeeze as much value into these 10 minutes as I can. So I made some notes. I made a couple of things, hints that I want to talk about, which should hopefully add some value to the quality of your life. Right, okay, so let's get into the first question, and let's get into today's show. Okay, so the first question goes, do you think when someone close to you dies, a part of you dies as well? The answer is, I do think that when somebody does pass away, that a part of you does die. I once read a book which said something on the lines of that when somebody passes away, it's like a death is the ripping of the soul. I've tried to explain many times that one of the realizations that I came up to in my life is that many of us tend to think about ourselves as simply the physical body. We tend to think about our body, we tend to think about how we manifest ourselves and how we present ourselves as being physically. But the reality of life is we are much more than just a physical being. We are emotional, we're spiritual, we've got a soul. And so we're a lot more kind of existential, and we're a lot more expanded in terms of our manifestation and in terms of our form than simply the physical form. And I do think that when somebody does pass away, one of the things that that is important to remember and is important for us to take into account is that yes, their physical being might have moved on, but for me, the way that I tend to think about particularly death is that I tend to think about death as in it's a transformation. If you look around at the world and you look around at the universe, it seems to me that nothing really ever really dies. It seems to me that everything simply transforms. And I was thinking about this, but particularly when I was making some notes on what do I think life is all about. I made some notes on that question of, Cass, what do you think life is all about? And for me, I came to think and came to the conclusion that one of the reasons why human beings are here is to essentially think of life not as a race, but life as a relay race. It is not a straight line dash, but rather as a relay. That actually one of the reasons why human beings are here and we exist is in some way to transform, to keep the evolution of the human spirit going to the next transformation. Just a bit like the caterpillar tries its best and does its best and in its form in order for it to transform into the butterfly. And so what I would share with you, and it's something that I would know, and as I was thinking about answering this question, is I think it's really important to realize that the person who passed away wasn't just the physical manifestation of who they were, but they were a lot more than just their physical being. They were an emotional being, they were a spiritual being, they had a soul, right? They were a lot more than just a physical being. And so when you ask me, does a part of you die when somebody passes away? I do think that it does, but not all of the person. And I think one of the other things that's important for me, that has been important for me to recognize about death and about people going on to the next transformation and going on to the next evolution of who we are as human beings, is if a part of us does die, and I would say that all of us in some way are connected, then that means that that person has also taken a piece of us with them, which I think brings me great comfort, because if you're asking this question and you're asking if does a part of you die, you must be clearly somebody who feels like your soul has been ripped apart, like somebody has taken something from you which they shouldn't have. And I think in part of that, if you've truly loved this person and you have been as close as you two can be, and you have given and loved this person as much as what you claim or what you think you have, and they've loved you in the same way, isn't it a great comfort to know that at some point, that somewhere out there in the next transformation, in the next metamorphosis, they have a part of you with them? And I wouldn't necessarily call it does a part of you die. I would say that a part of you is transformed. A part of you is taken to a new metamorphosis, to a new version of whatever that is. Just to kind of use an example, it's like, look, if you take water and you put it inside the freezer, technically the water has died, but it's transformed into ice. Right? The part of it that was before hasn't really died. It's simply transformed into something else. Nothing technically has really been taken away. And isn't it great that? And I was thinking about this as I was thinking about giving you advice for this, which is isn't it wonderful that if indeed a part of you isn't with them, imagine all the stories that you're going to be able to tell each other whenever you guys reconcile, whenever and you may not believe that God exists, you may not believe that there is anything higher, but I think, wouldn't it be of a great joy to know that when you reunite with this person, you can celebrate and laugh, and perhaps if they've evolved to such a degree that they can see you and they've been able to watch you live your life, wouldn't it be fantastic for them to see you living your life to the fullest? Wouldn't it be fantastic for them to see you living to become your highest, fullest expression of themselves? That their death wasn't the end of your life, but actually their death was the beginning of you living. You had a second chance at life. You now go at life with more vigor, with more love, with more passion. You now are going at life with just so much sort of tenacity that they look down and say, wow, is this because of the interaction and the love that we shared together? And I just think, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to look back whenever you pass away, or whenever you move to the next transformation? Wouldn't it be wonderful to laugh about all of the crazy things you got up to after somebody's death? I think, and I didn't really mention this at the beginning, that I think is really important to understand that death is something that literally is devastating for human beings. I was doing some research and I was looking at what causes human beings the most amount of pain. And, the thing that causes the most amount of pain is, from all the research that I found, was when a wife or husband passes away. And I always thought that maybe it might be a brother or a sister or your mum, but actually your partner passing away is one of the things that causes the most amount of pain to many of us. And so a death is a very devastating life, and I think a very devastating thing. And I think part of the reason why death is so, or a transformation or someone's passing is so painful, is because we look at it in terms of it is the ultimate signal that none of us really have any power, that we can do everything right and yet our life can be taken. And I think many times when we are living from that space where we're almost angry, where we feel that something has been taken from us, someone has gone, as Michael Jackson said, that someone's gone too soon, we can look at it and say, well, if somebody who is good can be this good, and they can put that much of themselves into the world and into being a good person, and yet their life has been taken too shortly, what power do I have? But I think one of the things that's really important to recognize and to think about is that whilst we may see somebody's death as being sad, that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't have a great life. I was thinking about a friend of mine who had their grandparents pass away, and one of the things that they were reminiscing about is it was sad, but they had a great life, right? They could have, of course, lived for many more years than their grandparent could have, but their grandparent had an incredible life. The grandparent had children, grandchildren, and I mean, what a joy even just children in themselves bring to somebody. And so I don't know. I don't know whether that has helped you or not, or that's really answered your question. But it's just, those are some of the thoughts that I was thinking about as I was thinking about sort of if a part of you dies. I definitely think a part of us is taken away when someone does pass away. But I think it's great to know that if a part of us is taken away, it is gone with the person, and they have the comfort of knowing that a part of us is also with them. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Thank you so much for the question. I really do appreciate it. So that now leads us on to the next question, and the next sort of scenario, which goes something like this. Number 2. So it goes, I ended a 2-year relationship yesterday, and it didn't fully hit me until today after I dropped off some of his things at his place. I drove home and realized that I will probably never see this person again, and just sat there in my driveway bawling my eyes out for 2 hours. It's strange. Everything I know and everything that I've done within these past few years has been with or for this one individual. Now that it's done, I don't know how to cope. I don't know how to move on with life when it just feels so incredibly empty. I'm sure many of you have been in this position. Many of you are older. What is your best advice for someone who is in this situation? So I want to firstly begin off by saying thank you very much for the question. I think it's a great question. And indeed, to begin off with, and by answering your question, many people have been in this situation. Many people have been in a situation in our lives where we've invested so much of ourselves, and this doesn't actually just apply to work, but actually it applies to all kinds of areas. Sorry, it doesn't just apply to a partner, it applies to all the different areas of life. One of the big realizations that I had to come to in my life is that grieving, or the grieving process, doesn't just apply to somebody passing away. The grieving process applies to anything that is taken away from us which we did not expect. It can be being in a job for a really long time. We've invested time, we've invested resources, we've come in on weekends, and we get made redundant. The company goes bankrupt and now we've lost our job. It can mean being in a situation where we've lost a lot of weight and now we've got to the point where actually we're grieving the old person who we used to be, because now we have more energy. Now we go at life with a different vitality and a different vigor. We can set goals that we never even thought about before. We've never even thought about thinking about climbing a mountain before, but now that we're fitter and we've got more vitality, that has become a possibility. And we have to mourn and grieve for the person who we used to be, because that was a part of us. So I think firstly, what you're going through is actually a really natural and normal thing for somebody to go through, to grieve that hurt. And I think one of the other things that I made down here as a thing for you to think about is, I would actually reflect, if I was in your situation, I would reflect a little bit on the joy and the laughter that this person brought you. Because yes, of course, whilst the ending may not have been the ending which you had in mind, the relationship brought you so much joy. Some of the best memories that you've ever had have been with this one person. And in fact, it was you who said in your question that everything that you did was with or for this one person. And part of the reason why you're grieving, and it really is, it's a great indication. The grieving is, this process of crying, this process of anger, this process of frustration that things didn't work out, is really an indication to you that you had something there, that you had something special, that you did have an incredible life, whilst the ending might not have been ideal. Which leads me to the second thing that I want to share with you, which is welcome to life. You know, we live in a world where I think, and I'm going to be a little bit harsh here, we live in a world where I think many of us live sometimes in delusion, in thinking that everything works out perfectly. But the reality of life is not everything works out well. We want everything to work out well. You know, if somebody's a good person and they love us, but we don't love them, we can put effort into it and we can desire to love them, but if we don't love them, we don't love them. And sometimes that happens. And I think it's really one of the big lessons that I would share with you, which is sometimes you win, but the reality of life is sometimes you also lose. You can have a great job with great colleagues, but there might be one person in that workplace who is causing you so much pain, so much anger, so much frustration that you have been pushed to the position where you have to quit the job and you have to stop and start all over again. And I think this is really part of life. And I think it's part of the growth, and I think it's part of that process of becoming a better, fuller expression of ourselves, and which kind of leads me to one of the other things that I wanted to share with you, which is that what have you learned from this? You know, I believe that everything that happens to us in life is here to teach us something. Everyone who comes into our lives is there to teach us something about us. And the great thing about the relationship that you went through is, obviously, number one, is ended. And, you know, you may be saying, yeah, everything that you've done was for this one person and with this one person. But let's consider all the other things as well. Let's do the maths. There's a reason why the relationship ended. Either they didn't feel the same way about you, or you no longer felt the same way about them. Maybe there was infidelity in the relationship. But either way, one of you or both of you was in so much pain to the degree that they couldn't be around you, right? And what I would share with you is that all of us in some way or another contribute to the success or the failure of our lives. We in some way contribute to the reason why we're in the position that we're in. Now, I didn't say that everything is your fault, and I didn't say that you were the problem. But what I am saying is that there is something either you did or didn't do that contributed to the breakup of the relationship. And that isn't room and doesn't and isn't an excuse for you to beat yourself down and say, well, this is bad, or I'm not enough, or there's something wrong with me. But that's room for you to reflect and say, okay, right, well, human beings can get better. There are some 7 billion people on this planet. There's loads of guys out there, there's loads of girls out there, there's loads of people out there who'd love me for who I am, but perhaps, okay, let me learn that maybe I was a little bit too much. Like we were together way too much to the degree that we didn't really have our separate lives. Like, it was insane. We were together all the time, every single minute of the day. And I didn't have any room to breathe. I didn't have anything outside of the relationship. I think one of the things that you talk about in your question is that you talk about the fact that now my life feels so empty. And the reality of life is, if you had lived or have been living a wholesome kind of life, your life shouldn't be empty. There should be a part of you where you say, actually, I would love for this part to be full, but this isn't the whole of my life. A relationship isn't the full extent of everything that I have to offer. A relationship is one element of life. What about what I offer to my friends? What about what I offer to my work colleagues? What about the interactions that I have with my nieces, my grandchildren, with my brother? Right? Your life isn't just simply about one area and that you provide value in one area. There is other people to whom you actually are an asset to. There is other people to whom you provide value to, and perhaps you didn't even recognize that. Or if you did, then are you reflecting on that is what I would share with you. And the other thing that I wanted to go back on and just touch on a little bit again is that actually sometimes one of the greatest gifts that can happen to us is a breakup. Because the breakup leaves room for us to sometimes just take a break, right? I don't know whether you've ever been in a situation, and I'm going to give you an example of what I mean. So last year, in 2020, I literally worked the entire year. I didn't take a single day worth of holiday. I literally worked the entire year. And when it got to the point where I think it was January the 3rd or something, I said, right, okay, I'm going to take a bit of a break. We're in a lockdown anyway. I'm going to take like a couple of days off. What was supposed to be a couple of days ended up actually turning into I think it was like 3 weeks off. Because when I stopped, I realized, oh my God, I am knackered. I am absolutely broken. And I just hadn't stopped. I just kept going and going and going and going and going. And sometimes when you are in that kind of survival and you are in that momentum, you neglect certain things. And perhaps for me, one of the things that I've learned last year is I wasn't healthy. I wasn't looking after myself spiritually. I wasn't looking after myself emotionally. I wasn't reflecting. I wasn't really fully journaling as much as I can. Some of the goals I was so busy on focusing on life that I forgot that sometimes as we grow and we develop, the things that we want change. And I hadn't updated my goals and my desires to reflect where I was emotionally, spiritually, as a person and in terms of my character. And when I stopped, I was able to do that. One of the great things about going through a breakup is that you can have room to now reevaluate. Maybe for you now, it's time that you spend some time working on your on your daddy issues. Maybe it's now time for you that you start looking at, okay, what are your hobbies? Maybe it's now time for you to start looking at the fact that every single relationship that you've been in, you have had insecurities around your body. Maybe it's now time that you figure that out, that you sort that issue out. Let's just spend some time on you. I don't know whether that kind of points you in the right direction or gives you the kind of advice that you were looking for. But I hope it's added some value and kind of given you some hinters. But thank you very, very, very much for the question. I thought it was a great question. So that now leads us to the third question, which is lessons has rejection what lessons has rejection taught you in life? Wow, what a great question. Okay, well, firstly, thank you very much for the question. Um, the first thing that rejection has taught me about life is I don't like it. Quite frankly, I don't like rejection. I'm one of these people where I'm kind of an optimist and I say, look, if it's a no now, then it will work out. But the reality of life is, I can tell you right now, as much as I'm an optimistic kind of guy, as much as I love, life, I don't like not getting what I want. I just don't. And so what I would share with you is, the fact that you feel rejected is nothing new. All of us feel rejected at one point or another, whether that be in terms of trying to get into a relationship, whether it be in business, whether it be just as simple as going somewhere and we don't get into a nightclub, right? Because we don't look old enough or because we look too drunk or whatever it may be, right? None of us really like rejection. So that's the first thing that I would share with you. The second thing that I would share with you is that rejection doesn't always mean no. Rejection can sometimes mean later. It can sometimes mean prove it, in other words. I think a lot of us, when we think about rejection, we tend to think that if I'm rejected, then it means that there is something wrong with me, that I'm not enough. But actually, if you look at rejection from the other point of view, from the other person's point of view, or from wherever you're getting the no or the rejection from, you will realize that essentially what they're saying is that you haven't given me a valid enough reason to say yes. So let's, for example, take rejection in a relationship. You might find that somebody rejected you, you ask them out and they say no. And you might find that actually, if you ask them why, the reason why they're saying no is because you haven't really got your life together. You like to drink, you like to smoke, and they're not really into that. Maybe you're just the kind of person who they don't like your demeanor. And so that doesn't mean that you then go and change yourself to meet what they want or what they're expecting. But what it does mean is that later on down the line, they could be for you when they're... Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. So I was talking to my dad, and we were talking about women. And we were talking about the fact that when women are younger and they're fitter, they tend to have a lot more choice about the kinds of men that they can have, right? They have a lot more choice, they're younger, they're more sexier. So they can be more specific about the type of person who they go for in terms of a relationship. But as a woman gets older, as she ages, the reality of life is, if she's not yet settled down, her definition and her requirements for a man begin to widen out. So for example, she may have wanted a guy who is 6'2". But as she gets older, she might have to settle for a guy who's 5'9". If she can't find somebody who is earns more than 150k a year, she might have to settle for a guy who earns 50k a year. So what I'm saying is, sometimes, yes, no means no, but sometimes no does mean later. It means you're not quite ready, you're not quite ripe. Right? You may not be a potential candidate. You may not be a competitor now, but later on down the line, you can become a competitor. Let me bring this home to you to prove my point. So when I first started off doing Castimotive, I really wanted to interview a lot of people. And the reality of life is I could not interview a lot of people because the people who I wanted to interview, I didn't have any credibility. I didn't have any presence on the internet. And so I had no reputation or no credibility to be able to interview them. But now that I've put out more videos, now that I've put out more of my kind of content and my thoughts and my ideologies and my tactics, when I reach out to somebody to give me some advice, people are a lot more willing to say yes to me now than they were when I had only first started out and I had no presence at all over the internet. So back then it was no, but I've gone back and asked people who I'd asked years ago if I can interview them, and those people said no to me then, but today the very same people say yes because things have changed. But back then it was no. So remember that sometimes no doesn't always mean no. The other thing is that actually rejection, for me, that I have learned, humbles you. No humbles you, because no, I think sometimes we can get so preoccupied with the fancy stuff, with being entitled. Well, I've worked really hard, and as a result, I deserve the promotion. And in that, we forget to be humble. We become arrogant. We expect certain things. But the reality of life is sometimes when you get a no, you're reminded that actually it is the basics that got you to where you've got to. It was the being polite, it was opening the door, it was asking questions, it was actually paying attention to the small details. And that was what allowed you in the beginning to get to the position that you're at. But you've got to the point now where, let's say you're a high achiever, you're doing fantastic in your job, but you've forgotten the small details. You've got to the point in your relationship where you want to ask your missus for marriage, but the reality of life is she says no because you haven't been doing the basic stuff that you were doing at the beginning of your relationship. At the beginning of your relationship, you would think about her, you would buy flowers, you would text her. You stop doing all of that now that you're 6 years into your relationship. And so by her saying no and her saying, I don't know whether you're the right person for me, means that you can now go back to the basics. You can now be reminded that you've got to be able to court once again. It's just something that for me has every time I get a rejection has always reminded me to really think about. Of course, the last thing that I want to share with you is that if somebody, of course, says no, sometimes the reason why they've said no is because it wasn't meant for you. As obvious as it is, if something wasn't, the reason why you've got no is because it wasn't meant for you. They weren't for you, right? And the reality of life is you have to be able to differentiate sometimes in life when certain things are not for you, because not everything is for you. You may really, really, really want to be with somebody, but they may not want to be with you because actually you don't suit what they're looking for. You may really, 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 really want to go to university, but the reality is that's just not who you are. You're more of a business person. You're more of an entrepreneur. And even though you want to fit in and into society and you want to go along with what everybody wants, it's just not going to happen. Let me tell you, for example, for me, why this applied. I tried my absolute best to try and fit into the world when I was growing up. I really wanted people to like me. I really wanted to fit into the world. And as I was growing up, because the reason for this is because as I was growing up, I never really fit in anywhere. I never really fit in with the black people. I never really fit in with the white people. I never really was a chav, but I was never really a posh boy. I never really was into kind of like smoking weed, but I was never really into not drinking. I was never really in any camp. I was just a very open person and I would go with the flow. And for years, I tried to fit in. I tried to be one of the football lads. But the reality of life is I just wasn't a football lad. But then I wasn't really into a gamer either. And it just got to the point where I realized, do you know what? Every time that I keep going down a route, it either doesn't work out, that either I don't fit into the group, or the people arrange stuff and then they don't invite me. And so I got to the point where I realized it just wasn't meant for me to fit in. It just wasn't meant for me to be part of the gang, to be part of a clique, to be one of the football lads, to be one of the lads, to be one of the gamers. It just isn't me. I'm just Cass, and I don't really fit in any of those categories. The way that I think, my level of ambition, none of it fits anywhere. And so what I would share with you is, sometimes one of the great things about no is that no really helps you introduce you back to you. It helps you realize who you are. It helps you say, maybe this is who actually I really am, or maybe that's not who I am at all. So I don't know whether that's been useful for you or not, or kind of giving you any thoughts to think about, but I really want to thank you very much for the question, and I hope it's kind of given you some thoughts. Thank you. So that leads us on to the fourth scenario, which says, do you think there is a difference between being addicted to something and being passionate? Answer, yes. I do think that there is a difference. And let me run down to you what I wrote down here. So when you're addicted to something, it means that the thing that you're addicted to controls you. When you're passionate about something, that passion drives you and sustains you. When you're addicted to something, you usually over excess in it. You take it and you do it to an extreme level, to the degree where it destroys certain aspects of your life, if not all of your life. It's like cancer. It begins to infect all the other areas of your life. So for example, if you're addicted to gambling, the gambling doesn't just stay in that gambling area. You begin to not lack sleep. You begin to become stressed. As you begin to become stressed, you begin to become agitated with your partner. As you begin to become agitated with your partner, you don't want to spend time at home. As you begin to not spend time at home, you want to spend more time at work. When you're at work, you're stressed out. When you're stressed out, you don't perform as well. So do you see what I mean? It's like an ever kind of evolving and expanding cancer that just doesn't stop. When you're passionate about something, you will do it for free. I wrote down actually the other day a note here which went something on the lines of that the true test of authenticity is work without guarantee of reward. When you're passionate about something to the degree that you're prepared to do it for free without you being paid for it, then that's how you are. That's a sign that you're really passionate about it. When you're addicted to something, it destroys your character. Addictions many times end up pushing us to the degree where we begin to violate our values. We begin to violate what we stand for and what we believe in. So for example, if you're addicted to cocaine, we know that one of the characteristics of people who are addicted to cocaine is that they tend to lie. They tend to manipulate people, not because they're bad people, because many times people who are cokeheads or people who take cocaine were raised in great households. They have brothers and sisters who are not addicted to cocaine, who are doing well, who are successful, who have families. And one of the things that we know about people who take cocaine is that they lie and they cheat and manipulate. I remember one time I was speaking to a guy and he said to me that when he was addicted to cocaine, he one time had a knife up to his mum's throat and told her that if she doesn't give him money, then she's going to kill him. Then he is going to kill her. And I thought, wow, imagine being driven to that extent that you would do something like that for your mum, to your mum. When you're passionate about something, you want others to also be passionate about it. You want other people to receive the same kind of joy, the same kind of reward that you are also receiving. So many times, if you see people who are really passionate about golf, anyone who is passionate about golf, they want them to be really passionate about it. They want to tell them every single little detail. When people are really passionate about something, they love it to the degree that they want the joy and the laughter and the excitement and the thrill that it brings them. They want to expand it beyond themselves, and they want to share it with somebody else. When it comes to addictions, addictions literally become your life, right? A passion is something you can do and then you can kind of set down. You go, you love your golf, you go and play your golf, you talk to everybody about golf, but then you can go home and you can talk to your missus about problems related to the local community. When you're addicted to something, the addiction literally becomes your life. It becomes all encompassing and it becomes overwhelming, because every minute you're trying to think of ways to be able to do the addiction more, to be able to find ways to fund the addiction, to find people who are going to be able to help you participate in it. When can you do it? Where can you do it? How much of it can you get? And your whole life becomes all about the addiction. But there is something else that I wanted to share with you, which is what I wrote down on my notes, which is that there's actually a middle ground between an addiction and a passion. And actually, and I'm only sharing this with you because I think it'll be useful for you. When I study high performers and, Olympians, CEOs of companies, top salespeople, executives, they have a combination of both of these actually. Which is very interesting. So they not only have a passion, but they also have an addiction. And they meet in the center to what I call an obsession. Because people who are highly successful and are winners and people who are succeeding are usually passionate about something to the degree where it almost consumes their life, but they kind of are in this tug of war between, I want to do it because I love it, I want to do it when it's fun, I don't want it taking over my life, but I also want I want to do well, I want to invest in it. It's this constant battle that I found successful people really have. And what I would share with you is, if you can find a way in your own life to be able to cultivate both of these and leverage them and balance them out, you can do the most remarkable things. There is a place for addictions, but don't go to the extent where the addiction is your full life. But there is also a place for a passion, but not to the degree but that the passion becomes your whole life. Let me explain this a bit further. So if you're just passionate about something, you can be passionate about golf, but it brings no monetary reward to you. But if you're really passionate about golf and you go and you start investing in the golf and you start reading books on golf and you start doing research and you start teaching people about golf, all of a sudden you now have found a vehicle to be able to provide value to the marketplace, to your family, to your friends, to your colleagues, to people, to golf courses, to people who want to learn about golf. You can now provide a value for it. But it combines both having a passion for it and having the drive to kind of want to succeed. And that drive of wanting to succeed, of wanting to become a winner, of wanting to compete, is on the darker side of life, which is around that kind of addictive personality that I believe many winners have. So I don't know whether that kind of has helped you out, but it's just, that's what I was thinking about when you asked me that question, and what I would share with you. But there's definitely a difference between the addiction and a passion. Thank you very, very much for the question, by the way. So that leads us on to our final question, and our final scenario, which asks that is intelligence or wisdom more useful? I repeat, it says, is intelligence or wisdom more useful? The answer to that question is both, as far as I'm concerned. Both of them are useful, and I'm gonna make a couple of statements that I've wrote down, and I hope they help you. Okay, so firstly, there is a place for both of these. Intelligent is acquisition of useful knowledge. I repeat, intelligence is the acquisition of useful knowledge. Wisdom is the application of it. I repeat, wisdom is the application of it. So let me put this in a full sentence. Intelligence is acquisition of useful knowledge. Wisdom is the application of it. So let me break these two down. So firstly, I think that if you are somebody who wants to live a rich and full life, you are going to need to acquire some level of knowledge. And that knowledge or intelligence will be in terms of not only things related to tactics and strategies and philosophies and ideologies and skill set and ideas, but it's going to be all encompassing. And with intelligence, one of the things that you have to discern is that which information should I be getting and where should I be getting it from. So I wrote down here that acquire information and then shift through it and then refine it. So number one, when it comes to information, the reason why information is useful is because information and intelligence can show you what to do. And it's important to know what to do. Like if you want to become, for example, wealthy in terms of money, in terms of assets, then you need to know how to do it. Which means you need to go and find people who've accomplished that, or read their books, or go to workshops. And there's a place for that. The second thing is that is really important is that you need to differentiate between and shift through multiple types of. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to combine these two because it would just be easier for me to combine them. So part of getting intelligence is being able to differentiate between what is useful and what is not useful. Because you can have a lot of information, but some of it may be garbage. And part of the reason why that is that information can become invalid and outdated. Information can become invalid and outdated. And part of the reason why it can is because as time moves on and as we get more information, things change. Ideologies change. You know, in 1940, the information that we had about how to succeed as a male was typically to go to university or go and work for a company for 30, 40 years. But the times have changed because now, today, the average company only lasts somewhere in the region of about 11 years. Whereas before, the same company would last for 80 years. So you now have no choice but to keep changing your jobs. And so as a result, you need to have updated your information so that it can be able to apply to today. The other thing is that it's important for you to get information from multiple sources because it is possible to get the wrong information. Sincerity is not a test of truth. It is possible for somebody to tell you something or to give you information which is not accurate. And they may be a loving, kind, good person, but it's important to understand that some people can be wrong, right? For example, I remember I study and I've studied a lot of people who come from extreme circumstances, such as being raised in the KKK. It is possible for your parents to love you, be great, good people as far as you see, and they tell you that black people, Chinese, anybody who is not of the Aryan race is a bad person, that they should be killed, that they do not have the same level of value as your race does, or as somebody who looks like you or acts like you or who thinks like you does. And that information is inaccurate. And so one of the things that I think is really important in life is you need to be able to go and gain information from multiple sources. And one of the things that I say to people is get information that contradicts you directly. The only way to actually find the truth is to go and find information that contradicts what you believe so that you can exercise and really see if what you believe to be the truth is the truth. And I tell you this because I have found that there are two types of truth. There is a truth and there is the truth. A truth is how you see the world. The truth is how the world actually is. And it's something that I think is really important. The thing about wisdom, by the way, that I think is also really important, which is why you need it, is that part of wisdom is discerning when you should use the information. There are a lot of people who are very intelligent, but they don't know when to use the knowledge that they have. For example, there are a lot of people who are really great at have a lot of information about patriarchy, about sexism, about football, but sometimes you have to be wise enough to know that actually, if we are at a family dinner where there's a lot of tension, where there's a lot of people who have very strong opinions, is it really wise for me to be going ahead and talking about the patriarchy and talking about religion and talking about politics, which are all very controversial conversations? Is it really going to be beneficial to this event? Or is it going to cause carnage? It's going to cause an argument. It's going to cause a shift and a rift in the family. Is it really of a benefit me saying something? And that's something that you have to think about for yourself, and you have to apply in your own life, and you have to examine. Nobody can do that for you. That's only you who can do that for yourself. The other thing about information that I think, and both wisdom, that I think is really important, is part of getting that information and that wisdom is being able to know that does the information actually benefit you or anybody else. There's a lot of people with information that means nothing. And so part of gaining information and part of intelligence and part of wisdom is knowing is knowing what information is actually useful. And part of that, which is what I want to finish off with, is about refining the information that you have. There's a lot of us who have a lot of information, but it's garbage. There's a lot of us who have a lot of information, but it hasn't been refined. It hasn't. We haven't adapted the information and the intelligence to reality, to meet us, to be useful to us. And so what I would share with you is you've not only got to be able to take the information, but you've got to be able to apply it to your own life. You know, sometimes I see people on the internet posting loads of memes about, I don't know, to be successful, you've got to be patient. That's wonderful, but you've got to look at, am I actually applying that knowledge in my own life? You may find that somebody might talk a lot about that to be successful, you've got to be patient. To be successful, you've got to be a hard worker. But then you've got to look at, does that really apply to me? Because you may already be somebody who's already working hard, but actually your problem or the error in judgment that you're making is a spiritual issue. And so you've got to be able to apply that to your own life. Forget about the problem. I tell you this because I think sometimes there is a tendency for people who are intelligent to think that every problem that needs to be solved is an intellectual problem. But the reality of life is that some problems are not intellectual problems, they're spiritual problems, they're emotional problems. They are marketing problems, they're sales problems. And you've got to be able to discern with that intelligence and wisdom, with your wisdom, which one of those you're supposed to be using. So I don't know whether that's helpful. I don't know whether it's answered your question, but it's just something that I kind of just wanted for you to think about. But definitely 100% you need both of them. Both of them are really useful, because if you have wisdom, right, but you don't have intelligence, you will not know what to do. So you may be wise, but you won't know the steps that you got to take. But if you know the steps, but you take the steps at the wrong time, then you're going to be a failure. So you need both, is what I would share with you. Thank you so much for the question, though. So that kind of finishes this week's episode of Student Problems. I don't know whether it's been useful for you or not. Do you have any questions that you want us to answer, or you want me to answer or look into? Send me a message on any of the usual platforms, and I will do my very best to answer the question. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel Casimotive on YouTube, and don't forget to like the notification button, which tells you whenever we upload a new episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.